understanding negotiations in a deal is going to be super important, and it will depend heavily on your position in the negotiations. So it's important to understand what your position is when going in, so you know what cards you have to play, or what you might need in the deal. Now, typically, there are two main elements that are sort of critical in a negotiation, and those are going to be like the terms of the deal and the price of the deal. So it's very rare that you're going to be able to negotiate both on the price as well as get the terms that you want. So typically, what's important is that you focus in heavily on which one is going to be more important for you at the end of the day. Now, in home buying or home selling, the negotiations are going to be dependent on a lot on the motivations of both the buyer and the seller. What I find is that a lot of buyers come in and they kind of come in with the mentality of, oh well, I'll start super low and then we can maybe negotiate to something in the middle. So that tactic can work in certain markets. It depends on the market heavily. Our market, for example, or the Orlando area, that's not really a good tactic because, and obviously it depends on the price point, but anything under 500,000, for example, you're really in a more leaning heavily toward the seller market. There are enough buyers out there. If you come in too low, the seller may not even consider the offer. So if you're looking to do a deal with someone, obviously you can try and beat them up on price and ask for all these different terms. Typically, those kinds of negotiations are done by real estate investors. And the reason why that can work for them is because they don't really have an emotional tie to the deal. They're really looking into just crunching numbers. And at the end of the day, it's just a numbers game for them. So they can pass on whatever house that doesn't work for them numbers wise. So they may make 4, 5, 6 deals, or rather 6 offers in a month. And if they don't get any of them, no big deal, because that's not where they're planning on living. They're just looking at the numbers. So they can stay within some kind of a threshold for numbers that make sense for them. But when you're looking to move into a home that you actually want to live in, that's kind of a different animal. And the reason why it's a different animal is because it's not just a numbers game. You're not looking to cap at a certain rate or get some kind of income from it, a minimum income, or get the right price, right? You're not trying to flip it or hold it or anything like that. You're trying to live in it. And there are going to be some intrinsic elements that have value for you personally. So you might want to live in a specific school district, and that has value. Now, that doesn't necessarily translate into some value materially for the home itself, but it has value for you personally. So that is going to be something you need to consider in your negotiation. If there's something about the deal that's important, so let's say you need closing costs, right? That's going to be important for you because maybe you're cash strapped and you just don't have the money to close on the deal, and you need the seller to provide you some closing costs. Well, that's going to be the terms of the deal that we're talking about, right? The terms that you were wanting is you want the seller to pay for closing costs. Well, if you want the seller to pay for closing costs, then it's going to be difficult for you to also ask for a discount on the price, especially if the price is within the market range. So when you're going into a negotiation, you got to take in consideration, if you're going to be living in it, just some of the intrinsic value elements. So like I said, if you live in a neighborhood or an area that's really appealing to you personally, if the home has some element that's super important to you, maybe there's a bonus room that has a ton of value to you because you want to turn that into a studio or something like that. But at the end of the day, you really want to make sure that you include the value that comes from the house or the home having some intrinsic value as a buyer, right? And you also want to take into consideration that you're going to want to either negotiate on terms or on price. To try to negotiate on both of those, you can usually, in many cases, turn off a seller, which again, an investor doesn't care about turning off a seller because they may make 5 offers in a month or a week even. But a buyer looking to buy a home, if that's a home that matches all of your needs, insulting the seller could become problematic, because if the seller thinks that you're unreasonable at the beginning of the offer stage, they may also think that you would be unreasonable after inspection or appraisal or throughout the process, and it could become a problem for when they go to actually, when they go to close. So they may not want to deal with you just because they may feel like you're going to be unreasonable for all these other things. So just make sure that when you're going into negotiations that you're thinking about those elements. So I would focus heavily on either the terms of the deal or the price of the deal, depending on what's going to be more important for you. So if you have the closing costs and you just want to get the best price, then go ahead and let's make a clean, simple negotiation and try to get the best price for it. Don't try to get the best price and also get them to pay for closing costs, and ask for a home warranty, and make sure that they also fix 27 different things in the home. Like, try to keep the deal as simple as possible, because that's going to be your best option, your best chance at being able to make that deal happen for you, because now you have leverage. If you go in at a full price but you have all these terms that you want, which is fine, your leverage is that you're coming in at full price or close to full price, right? You're coming in really strong with the price, but you want these terms in order for that deal to happen, right? If it's flipped the other way and you're wanting to negotiate on price, then that's fine too. But that also means that you don't really have any crazy terms that you want to necessarily go with, right? You want to make the terms favorable for the seller, so you're willing to go ahead and make the terms favorable for the seller so that you can get the best price that makes them the most sense for you. And of course, all of this all boils down to the motivations of both the seller and the buyer. But it's just important for you to understand that when you're going into negotiations, there are these very important elements to take into consideration. And, don't use a strategy that is designed for a real estate investor for you to buy your personal home. The strategies are very different. They have very different outcomes. They have very different tactics. And, the outcome is just not going to work for you. You're going to have a hard time trying to buy a personal home using the strategy that a real estate investor uses to buy investment homes. So just take that into consideration when you're going into your strategy component and negotiations for the home that you're looking to buy or a home that you're looking to sell.